everyone. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And today we have the lovely guest.
Hi, my name is Caroline. I just finished my 1 year at the University of Michigan Law School. I'm a rising 2L, and I'm originally from Toronto.
And I heard that you were an actor before law school. Can you just tell us a little bit about your experiences before law school?
Yeah, so Toronto has a huge kind of film industry. I think it's cheaper for places to come to Toronto to film. And so there's a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, especially Netflix shows that film in Toronto. And so something that a lot of kind of students in Toronto do is they'll work as a background actor as a part-time job. And it's super easy because I get to pick when I want to work. I'll sign up for the jobs I want to do. And then a lot of the work is just me waiting around on set. So I can use that time to study. I studied for the LSAT on set. Like it was just a lot of free time and you get to be paid for doing like very little work. So it was super great as a student. And so yeah, so I worked as a background actor for like about 3 years before coming to law school.
Nice. And so why did you apply for law school in the US? Like what was yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Mhm. So in my cycle, I applied to a couple of Canadian schools, and then I applied to a bunch of the T4 teams in the US. And so I've always wanted to do international law. I'm always super interested in kind of international like human rights work, public international law. But I also like wanted to go into big law first. I wanted to make that money first. And so like most of the large kind of international arbitration, which was what I was kind of into, those law firms, there aren't as many that are headquartered in Toronto. Toronto is a really international arbitration hub. And so I knew that like if I really wanted was serious about international law work, the US would kind of set me up if I could make it into a kind of a top 14 school. Just the reputation of the school and the opportunities in the US were much better. I also knew that I wanted to go into big law, and so the earning difference in the US and Canada is crazy. So in the US, as some of you may know, as a first year big law associate, I think the salary right now is about 190K if you're in New York at like a big law firm. But versus in Canada, if I graduate the same 3 years of law school and I go to like a big law firm, the salary is only about 90K. So it's like almost twice, yeah. So I was like, well, I really like the sound of 190K. And also I've lived in Toronto almost my whole life, and my options were either to go to the University of Toronto for law school or go to the US. I really wanted to try and live somewhere else and like move somewhere else for once. And so just a bunch of factors pushed me to go into the US for law school.
Awesome. And so as far as being an international student, how does like the financial aid and all that work? Because I know a lot of people are wondering like, can they get loans? Like, how do they do it? Do they have to have the money ahead of time? Like, how does that all work? Especially for like,
Right. So generally for merit aid for the scholarships that law schools try and give you and like to try and get you to come, I'm eligible for all of those. So I was able to get a scholarship for Michigan, and I could do the whole like scholarship negotiation thing. They don't care if you're an international student. And so if you're hoping for scholarship aid, like don't worry about that. Like they'll definitely consider you as if you were just a normal domestic student. Outside of that, though, I'm not eligible for FAFSA, which is, I believe, the federal like student loans in America, because I'm an international student. So I'm not eligible for that. And so, if the school itself has any loans that they're giving out, so for Michigan, if you're getting any kind of merit aid, you cannot apply for loans. That's just how the way it works. But I think that if I were applying to the school for just its financial aid loans, if it's any kind of federal money, then I'm not allowed to get it. So if it's the school that has its own money that's giving it out for financial aid, then I would be eligible for that. But if it's coming from the federal government, I can't get it. So for example, this year, the federal government gave schools a bunch of COVID grants that they could then distribute to their students. I think people got like about $1,000 each. It was supposed to help, the transition to virtual school. If you had any movie expenses, get a new laptop or something. And so I wasn't eligible for that because that was federal money. And so to pay for the rest of my tuition, I had to get a loan from Canada. So I could get Canadian banks to provide me with a loan. And usually, I'm not sure about other countries, but usually for Canada, if you're going to a grad school program, so med school, law school, dentistry, anything like that, the rates that they give you are fairly competitive with if you were just to get a loan from the government itself. So it's almost like right at the interest rate that the government would charge for a student loan. So it was like it came out to be roughly the same, but I had to get it from a Canadian bank. And the important thing to know is if you're going to the US and you're an international student, to get the visa, you have to show you have to be able to pay for tuition for the full year. So you have to get the loan in advance and have like proof from the bank that you have this money ready to be able to get the visa to come to the States.
okay. And as far like, how did you find the bank? Like, is there any resources or anything you would recommend for people who are like, are just like, I like have no idea where to start and look?
Yeah. So usually from the if the country you're coming from, you should already like have a bank that you use already. And they almost will always have kind of loans ready because like bank like they make money this way, right? Like but if you don't necessarily if your bank doesn't necessarily do it, I'm pretty sure like the largest bank in your country. So for me, I went to the Royal Bank of Canada, which is like the bank in Canada, and they will almost always have loans that you can go for. And you just ask them. I googled it, and so it was on their website. But you can give them a call. You can ask them for like grad school loans, and they'll be happy to talk about it.
Okay, and what stage in the process would you do this? Like after you've gotten some acceptances, you like,
Yeah,
but the timing might be like a little difficult. So, yeah.
yeah. So it is definitely a little complicated. I wouldn't worry about this during the year. I think it maybe when you're applying for law school, let's just take a quick look at how your banks do things. But generally, if your banks are kind of like the Canadian banks, you can get it done fairly quickly. Like you can get it done in like a week or two. And so I didn't worry about it until after the deposit deadline, like after I had to decide for a school, and then in the summer when I was figuring out where to go and stuff, and then like how to move and all that. That's when I kind of applied for the loans and stuff, and it's pretty straightforward. The only thing is usually because I came straight out of undergrad, I don't have a lot of credit, I don't have a lot of like work or income in my experience. So you need someone to co-sign your loan. So whether that's a parent or maybe you have a sibling or someone who's actually earning income. So that might be a little bit difficult if maybe like you don't have your parents in the picture or something. But I'm sure there's a way to figure that out. But yeah, so you do kind of need someone who is actually earning an income for a while to co-sign your loan for you.
Damn, tricky, tricky. Okay. And
Yeah.
as far as applying as an international student, like, did you take the LSAT or the GRE? Like, did they have testing locations to be able to take those tests? Like, how does that all work?
Yep. So I took the LSAT, although I could have taken the GRE too. And then there were a ton of LSAT locations in Canada just because Canadian law schools also accept the LSAT. So like you also need to take the LSAT for Canadian schools. So it was actually really easy for me to take the LSAT. But I know I have some friends who are also from kind of other places, and there are LSAT testing place, places abroad. So um, it may be a little tricky if your country doesn't have one, but I'm sure there are now that it's remote, there may be like remote options to do it. I'm not really sure, but Canada did have a lot of LSAT testing like places, and I know other places do. And then I took the LSAT, and in terms of applying, I can talk about that process too. So I applied through LSAC. I think international students all apply through LSAC. The only tricky thing is if you're coming from a different country, the process of sending your transcript may be a little bit different. And so the process of sending my transcript, I think, was different from how domestic students sent theirs. But there are instructions on the LSAC's website, depending on where you're from, on how you send your transcript. And luckily for me, my grades were converted like on the normal LSAC scale. But if you're coming from maybe a different international institution, then the GPA conversion gets a little tricky. So sometimes some international students don't have a GPA result at the end. It's more like kind of like a pass fail style of LSAC conversion.
Okay, awesome. And then did you write a like a diversity statement or personal statement? And if you
Uh,
any like advice that you how you went about the process?
Yep. So I when I applied for law school, I got the advice to write every essay you can that like applies to you. So I wrote all the optional essays. I did write a diversity essay, but I didn't submit it for the schools that define diversity a little bit more narrowly. So some schools had more like more broad diversity prompts. So then I could write about like for those prompts they accepted like if you were not a URM, you could kind of if it's still a minority, you could write about it. If you were coming from like a socioeconomic class that was more of a minority, or like so schools that accept like first generation as like minority, those diversity statements, I wrote diversity statement for that. And I didn't try to like the way I framed it was more of like, okay, I'm bringing this unique perspective to your school and this is why you want me, and that's why I approached that essay. It wasn't like a oh I'm a minority, please take me kind of thing. And then for my personal statement, my approach was definitely like, okay, I know I don't have the most work experience, but like I think I'm a very unique person. I think that I would bring a lot to your campus. Here are my interests. Here's what I want to do, and here's what I would bring to the school community. I focused a lot on how like I love building community. I love like making those connections at school, making friends, and that was my whole theme. And I think it fit Michigan really well because Michigan loves the whole like Michigan difference, like they love the whole building community thing, and so that was kind of my into Michigan. And so yeah, I think it's important to you can definitely reuse your personal statement. There's no need to write a completely new one for every school, but it is important to tailor it for each school. So got into Georgetown too, and Georgetown I really played up the international law thing. Just Georgetown is in DC, so they love like when you talk about like, oh, international law, the DC location. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, this concludes our first segment, and stay tuned for part two of this interview.